Another day, another banger. Welcome to the entire Underworld franchise, chronologically recapped to perfection. All movies, animations, and short films are time-stamped, so without further ado, make sure to sit back, relax, and enjoy the timeline recap. Underworld, Rise of the Lycans begins with a woman named Selene recounting how centuries back the vampires, led by Victor, defeated the werewolf army and enslaved them. Initially, the werewolves were stuck in their animal form, but from them a child named Lucian was born who could transform into human form at will. Victor used this new breed called Lycans to protect the vampires during the day when vampires are vulnerable. Some years later at the Vampire Council, Victor is informed by one of his council members named Coloman that werewolves have attacked the slaves of human nobles, but Victor dismisses them as he has little regard for human affairs. Meanwhile, Victor's daughter named Sonia rides across the dark woods in full armor, but her path is blocked by a werewolf which makes her change course. However, the werewolves start chasing her. She strikes one down from horseback with her sword and kills another one by launching projectiles from the blade. When the guards see her coming, they use their ballistae to shoot the werewolves. But Lucian, who is now an adult, skillfully takes down the remaining werewolves with a crossbow as Sonia returns safely to the castle. She then scolds Lucian for interfering, but Victor encourages him to keep serving the vampires for the better of his people and orders him to dispose of the carcass of the werewolf that snuck into the castle before being put down. Victor rebukes Sonia for endangering her life in the forest and urges her to focus on her status as a council member and a vampire elder. Later, Lucian burns the body of the werewolf and continues the hard labor that the Lycans are forced to do for the vampires, under the supervision of Death Dealers, an elite group of vampire assassins created to control the Lycans. One of the Death Dealers starts lashing a Lycan man for slacking, prompting Lucian to interfere, annoying the Death Dealer, who vows to punish him. Meanwhile, back at the council, Coloman suggests the formation of an elite Lycan class to protect the slaves of human nobles against the werewolves during the day, in return for money. Victor is reluctant to trust the Lycans with such a task, but agrees to consider it in the meeting with the nobles. Elsewhere, Lucian takes advantage of the distracted guards to open a hatch and access a secret path to an abandoned tower where he finds Sonia and the two get intimate. Lucian then reveals to her that he has acquired the key to open his collar and is planning to escape, and asks Sonia to leave with him, but she is afraid of the consequences in case they are caught. Later, a death dealer named Tanis sees her leaving Lucian's quarters. Victor asks Tanis to summon Sonia, but he says that she did not let him enter her room, thus hiding her affair from Victor. When a carriage of human nobles accompanied by their slaves arrive, the vampire guard goes to escort them, and Sonia also joins in, dismissing the concerns of Tanis and Lucian. After she leaves, Tanis tells Lucian to be careful with his actions, implying that he knows about his affair with Sonia. Just as Sonia reaches the carriage, Lucian senses the presence of a great number of werewolves, so he steals a horse and goes to help Sonia. Meanwhile, the carriage is attacked by the werewolves, who slay the vampires, slaves, and nobles inside the carriage, but are resisted by Sonia, who fights alongside Lucian. However, the werewolves overwhelm them with numbers, forcing Lucian to take off his collar, transform into his werewolf form, and command the werewolves to retreat. Just then, Tanis and Victor arrive with backup and they shoot down Lucian with silver arrows, returning him to his human form. Victor then scolds both Sonia and Lucian for defying orders, and the dead bodies are burnt while the remaining slaves are brought back. Later that night, Victor condemns Lucian for betraying his trust and has him flogged at the hands of the Death Dealer, who vowed revenge on him when Lucian stopped him from being harsh with other Lycans. But now the Lycans, Sonia, and other vampires watch. Coloman protests this because he sees Lucian as an asset who can incite a rebellion if mishandled, but Victor dismisses his plea. After the flogging, an unconscious Lucian is thrown into the prison, where a slave named Reyes, who survived the attack on the escort of the nobles, saves his life by pouring water in his mouth from the adjacent prison cell. Meanwhile, Victor confronts Sonia for showing sympathy towards Lucian, emphasizing that he will stay in prison as an example for other Lycans, and he also urges her to prepare for the arrival of the human nobles, as she shouldn't forget that she is a council member. On the other hand, Lucian wakes up in his cell and commends Reyes for fighting off the werewolves, revealing that they are mindless beasts born of William, while he is a Lycan, a much smarter creature. But Reyes reminds him of how the werewolves obeyed Lucian in his wolf form. At midnight, while the nobles start coming in, Sonia sneaks into the prison to see Lucian, who instructs her to bribe Tanis, so he will help them escape. Later, Sonia takes her place in the council, where the human nobles arrive with chests full of silver for getting protection against the werewolves. However, Victor is not satisfied with the offering of one of the nobles, named Janash, who gets angry and highlights how Victor has failed to protect his silver mine, and that even his own people hide in the castle from the fear of the werewolves. Victor is enraged, and he immediately takes Janash's life by taking hold of his neck and smashing him into a pillar, while also challenging the other nobles. Meanwhile, when the Lycans in their cells are brought food by the vampires, they fight for it like savages, prompting Lucian to scold them for not realizing their potential, as they fight amongst themselves instead of fighting against their oppressors. Back at the council hall, the body of Janash is cleared up and Victor consults Sonia on whom to replace Lucian with, as he cannot be trusted due to his disloyalty and the power to incite a rebellion. Sonia is against the idea, but suggests a couple of names to avoid suspicion, and later confronts Tanis to discover his intentions. Finding him interested in being a council member, Sonia offers to leave her seat for him in return for helping Lucian escape, and he agrees to let her see him in secret, where she asks him to escape and meet her at the clearing by the river. Before the sunrise, when the slaves are being turned by getting them bitten by lichens, Tanis secretly slips the collar key to Lucian, who upon seeing Reyes recruits him for his escape plan. Later, when the death dealer who flogged Lucian comes to check upon the newly turned lichens, he is tricked by them into believing that Lucian has escaped, which makes him enter the cage, only to find Lucian waiting to ambush and massacre him in his werewolf form.
Are you with me?
Lucian then gets out and releases all the prisoners, rallying them across the prison and outside onto the castle walls. However, the vampires turn their ballistae against them, killing many, while also restricting the rest from escaping the castle. Lucian promises to come back for the rest of the lichens, while Victor is informed of the ongoing escape, where Lucian along with Reyes and some others try to find a way out of the castle. Eventually, Lucian pushes 2 vampire guards through the window along with himself while the sun rises on the horizon. The vampires are vaporized midway through the fall, and the lichens get away, while Victor watches them with anger and frustration from the window. Moments later, Victor examines Lucian's cell and finds the discarded collar, which makes him suspect and almost take out Tanis. However, he swears that the keys to the collar lie in the armory. Meanwhile, Lucian with his fellow runaways plan on fighting their way into the castle by acquiring weapons from the estate of Reyes' former master to free their comrades. In the castle armory, Tanis rummages through the weapons and eventually finds the key, prompting Victor to say that he always trusted Tanis, and that Lucian could have forged a copy of the key for himself. Outside the castle, Lucian gathers the runaways and addresses them, urging them to fight alongside him for their freedom. After that, he assigns Reyes the task to go to the other western estates to enlist more people to their cause, while he himself leaves to go in search of help. Meanwhile, Victor continues his investigation of the escape and discovers the hatch in Lucian's living area, which he used to get to the meeting point with Sonia. Elsewhere, Lucian manages to discover the lair of the werewolves and goes inside to meet the leader with whom he comes face to face, and the tidings of their new allegiance are sensed both by the lichens and Victor while standing on top of his castle walls. Some time later, while Sonia is in her room alone, Victor comes up to her and expresses sadness at the loss of Lucian, trying to bait her into showing tenderness for him. However, when she does not do so, Victor directly questions her about whether she helped Lucian escape. Sonia denies this accusation, but not trusting her, Victor bites into her neck, gaining access to her memories and discovering her affair with Lucian, which enrages him, and he restricts her movements to her room. Elsewhere, Lucian returns to the lichens and his confidants inform him about the increase in their number, which by the end of the week will be enough to lead an attack against the vampires. When asked about Sonia, they tell him that she has not come, and Christo insists that they must not trust her as she is a vampire. However, Lucian punishes him for insulting her and leaves. Meanwhile, at the castle, another council member, Orsova, informs Victor of Lucian's raids on neighboring estates to steal their weapons, and Koloman insists that he must be brought in, but Victor claims that Lucian will return himself as he has something Lucian wants. Moments later, Sonia's friend Luca arrives at the lichen camp and informs him of Sonia's arrest, leading Lucian to set off to save her despite Reyes' warnings. Meanwhile, Victor lies in wait for Lucian, who easily sneaks into the castle and kills the guards outside Sonia's room. They then use the hatch to escape, but Victor is informed of their escape and he uses his vampire senses to guide his men in dropping barrels full of explosives along with torches into the hatches closest to the lovers' location, eventually trapping them and forcing them out into the open. They fight the vampires together, but Lucian is overpowered and surrounded, while Sonia faces off against Victor. Eventually subduing him and asking him to let them go for the sake of his grandchild, as she is pregnant with Lucian's baby. However, Victor is enraged at this and overpowers Sonia, who is then put in prison alongside Lucian. In jail, Lucian blames himself for their troubles, but Sonia tells him not to regret his choices as it makes him who he is. She is then taken to be judged by the council while Lucian is shot with silver arrows, and is forced to watch as all members, including her father, vote for her execution. Victor shows sorrow when he is alone, but lets the lovers be taken to the courtyard and tied down, while a guard is ordered to flog Lucian. After the flogging, they move out of the courtyard, and the roof above it is open to let the sunlight in. The lovers exchange their final words before the sunlight falls on Sonia, burning her to death. Lucian mourns his loss, while Victor does the same in the secrecy of his room. At night, Victor comes to see the corpse of his daughter and takes her necklace while ordering his men to bring him his knives. However, before Lucian can be executed, he takes advantage of the full moon to transform and break free, snatching the necklace from Victor before running outside in an attempt to escape. However, the guards shoot him with silver arrows and bring him down right at the brink of the castle walls, where he roars for help. The lichens hear his call along with the werewolves, whose hordes suddenly start pouring out of the woods and rushing to the castle. The lichens charge alongside the werewolves while the vampires shoot at them with their ballistae, bringing down some, while the others reach the walls and take out the soldiers manning the ballistae. They start pouring into the castle and massacring the vampires. Even the council members are not safe as their escape is blocked and they are cut down one by one. Reyes reaches the wall eventually and takes out the silver arrows in Lucian's body to relieve him, and he is directed to free the rest of the lichens. Moments later, Reyes storms the prison and releases the caged lichens, giving them keys to their collars and telling them to fight for revenge. Meanwhile, Victor and his death dealers arm themselves for battle, while Tanis, who is trying to save his scrolls, is ordered to help the elders instead. He thus loads the sarcophagi onto a boat in the dungeons, while Victor and his death dealers come face to face with Lucian in the courtyard. In the battle, the lichens butcher the vampires, and Lucian easily cuts down the death dealers as he sees Victor escape through a hatch. He chases him through the castle to the dungeons, where Tanis is busy escaping with his scrolls and sarcophagi. Victor ambushes Lucian, and they engage in a brutal fight where Victor tries to escape down the well. A crack appears in its roof, and Lucian uses the chains hanging from it to widen the opening. The sunlight forces Victor into a corner where he is overpowered by Lucian and killed with his own sword, which pierces his skull and causes him to fall lifeless into the well. Outside, Lucian proclaims the beginning of their golden age as the lichens roar in victory in the morning sunlight. However, a few miles away, a ship sailing across the sea carries Victor and Tanis with many sarcophagi, in one of which Victor takes refuge. Many centuries later, Selene sits on a balcony and reminisces about the words of a man who told her that it was Victor who killed her family and spared her by turning her into a vampire because she reminded him of Sonia. Underworld Endless War Part 1 opens up in 1890 in Victor's absence. However, his most powerful death dealer, Selene, hunts the lichens, and she is currently on a mission to eliminate 3 lichen brothers who have disguised themselves as lords in France. She admits she has been killing lichens for the past 400 years, hoping Victor will be impressed with her work when he wakes up. In Paris, she sees Ares, one of the brothers, getting into a carriage and soon rushes after it. But Ares tells his brothers Regus and Crandall that they've been found. However, Regus confidently tells Ares to let the death dealer come as they won't run away. Selene enters the castle, senses the 3 adversaries behind her and attacks them. One of them manages to wound Selene, but she quickly regains control and stabs him before opening fire. 2 of the brothers quickly retreat while Ares turns back into his human form, which Selene doesn't hesitate to kill. The 2 brothers, on the other hand, escape on a boat, and Crandall is disappointed for fleeing the fight, but Regus tells him that they will get their revenge. Part 2 opens up 77 years later, where Selene learns that the Lichen brothers are in Paris, but this time waiting for her. She expresses anger towards the new greedy vampire leader, Craven, with whom she is soon to be betrothed. She gets a call from Craven, warning her that he won't accept failure again. Meanwhile, Crandall tells Regus that he saw Selene, and Regus suggests they draw her out at the Crimson Moon ceremony, because she must be there to protect Lord Clovis. Later that night, they get on the roof of the mansion where a vampire lord is making a sacrifice, and the Lichen brothers jump in to attack the vampires. Selene soon reaches the mansion and opens fire, but the lichens hide in the dark before one attacks her from the front. She quickly takes out her sword and stabs him to death before throwing a blade at the other, which cuts off his arm, and he runs away to save his life, but Selene doesn't follow him since she believes that she will eventually find him. Underworld opens up at night, where Selene narrates that the war came to a halt as soon as Lucian was killed. The lichens retreated within a single day, and victory belonged to the vampires, who consider it their birthright. 6 centuries have passed since the death of Lucian, and ever since the lichens have become fewer in number. But the war has gotten riskier because of advanced weapons. However, their mission remained the same: to hunt down the lichens one after another, despite many vampires no longer considering lichens a threat. Selene and another vampire named Rigel enter the subway and discover that 2 lichens, including Reyes, are after a human named Michael Corvin. Reyes senses the vampires nearby and opens fire, killing Rigel with mysterious glowing bullets. A bystander accidentally gets shot, and Michael dives in to help her. However, just as a lichen tries to grab Michael, Selene starts shooting and rushes after the lichen, who tries to run away. At the same time, another vampire named Nathaniel battles with Reyes, who turns into his werewolf form to finish the fight. Selene tracks the other lichen deeper into the tunnels and shoots him dead before examining the glowing bullets the lichens used on the vampires. Reyes follows them by picking up their scent, and Selene quickly throws 4 blades at him to impale him before hiding from him. But she suddenly hears various lichens roaring in an underground fighting ring. Before she can investigate, she realizes that Reyes is nearby and quickly runs away again. In the fighting pit, Lucian fires a bullet to catch the attention of everyone and screams at them for acting like animals, telling them they won't be able to defeat the vampires like this. Meanwhile, Celine rushes to a mansion and puts the glowing bullets in front of Khan, the head of vampire weapons. Craven, the current vampire leader, joins them, and Khan explains that the bullets are laced with ultraviolet radiation. Believing the military to have engineered this weapon, Celine says that Nathaniel might be alive, so they should gather a group of death dealers and head to the tunnels, but Craven refuses, saying that the vampire mansion is already in unrest due to the upcoming awakening. Celine resists, suggesting that there might be hundreds of lichens in one place, but Craven reminds her that lichens are at the brink of extinction, and Khan agrees. Celine tells them to check once, and Craven decides to form a search team under Soren, making Celine angry. She goes up and stares at Victor's tomb, wondering why Victor left Craven in command, as Craven is a bureaucrat and not a warrior, but another vampire, named Erica, tells her to get ready, as Amelia's envoy will arrive soon. Celine heads to her room and looks at the pictures of lichens they took earlier and notices Michael in one of the pictures, quickly realizing that the lichens were after him. Erica comments that Michael is attractive but quickly leaves when Craven comes in to tell Celine that he wanted to have her by his side this evening, but she tells him to take Erica instead. He comments that she takes warrior business too seriously, but before she can say anything, the envoy arrives and he leaves. At the lichen's lair, a scientist named Singe mixes human and lichen blood, but finds it incompatible, telling Lucian that they need Michael's blood to test the compatibility. Reyes brings the dead lichen and tells Lucian that they were ambushed, so they failed to capture Michael. Lucian questions if the vampires realized that they were after Michael, but Reyes isn't sure, so Lucian says that he will bring Michael here himself. Meanwhile, Craven waits for Celine, but is informed by Erica that Celine has left the mansion. She breaks into Michael's apartment and starts looking for clues that might link him to the lichens, while Lucian goes to Michael's workplace disguised as an officer looking for him. Michael enters his apartment and Celine quickly questions why the lichens are after him, but before he can answer, the lichens show up, making Celine open fire, which gives Michael enough time to run to the elevator. Lichens are less affected by the bullets in their wolf form, so Celine escapes to the lower floor. Just as Michael gets out of the elevator, Lucian stands right in front of him, but Celine shoots him multiple times. In desperation, Lucian bites Michael to suck his blood and spits it into a test tube. Celine drags Michael away while Lucian, using his power, pushes out the bullets from his body. Celine gets in the car with Michael to escape, but Lucian quickly jumps on the car and uses a sword to pierce it, eventually impaling Celine. She suddenly uses brakes, making Lucian fall on the ground before hitting him with the vehicle and escaping. Michael tells her to stop the car, as she has lost a lot of blood, but Celine refuses, saying that she will be fine. However, she soon loses consciousness and the car flips before falling into the river. Michael manages to shoot the glass open and save himself and Celine from drowning. He gives her CPR and tears his jacket to wrap it around her wound to stop the bleeding. Meanwhile, Lucian heads to Singe with the sample and tells him that in 2 days Michael will turn into a lichen and come looking for them. Singe performs the test and confirms that Michael is a vampire blood carrier. On the other hand, Celine wakes up and takes Michael to the vampire mansion, where Erica questions whether Celine is going to turn Michael into a vampire, which Celine declines. She is then called by Craven, who is angry that Celine disobeyed his orders and spent a night out of the mansion with a human. He tells her to stop working on her ridiculous theory, as Lucian wouldn't be slightly interested in a human, and concludes that Celine is infatuated with Michael. Back in Celine's room, Erica is looking at Michael and discovers the lichen bite. When Michael wakes up, Erica turns hostile, leaving him no option but to jump from the high window, causing Michael to escape. Craven and Celine barge in after hearing the sound of Michael's escape, and Craven slaps Celine in anger. Later, Celine is practicing shooting when Khan comes and hands her a new gun, which has bullets injected with silver nitrate, a lethal chemical for the lichens. She asks Khan if he believes that Lucian died the way Craven told them, as their only proof is his word. But Khan says that he has never doubted Craven. Meanwhile, Craven goes to meet Lucian and angrily tells him that he was supposed to lie low, but Lucian grabs Craven's neck, telling him that he only has power because he is known to kill Lucian, and without him he would have nothing. On the other hand, Celine discovers a locked door in the library, which she breaks open and reads that out of all vampires that entered Lucian's fort, only Craven survived and returned with skin cut from Lucian's arm as proof of the lichen leader's demise. She finds a portrait of Lucian and realizes that he is wearing the same necklace as the lichen who was after Michael. As she is leaving the library, Erica tells Celine that Michael has been marked by a lichen. Michael rushes to the hospital and tells his colleague that he has been having hallucinations ever since he was bitten, but his colleague calls for the police and Michael is forced to escape. Back at the mansion, Celine tells the guard that Khan wants to see him and opens Victor's hibernation chamber when the guard leaves. She thinks of how an awakening has never been done by someone like her, as only a vampire elder can organize memories, but she hopes that Victor will hear her plea. She bites her arm and drops her blood into a vial that drops into Victor's mouth. She apologizes for breaking the chain and waking him ahead of schedule, as she believes that Lucian is alive and Craven is working with the lichens. She suddenly hears a commotion and heads outside to find that Michael is at the mansion's gate looking for her. Craven tells her that if she goes out to Michael, she will no longer be welcome in the mansion, but she tells him that Victor is awake, so he will be the one in charge now. Craven goes to check and Erica follows him, but Victor is really alive and tells Erica to leave them alone. Celine picks up Michael and tells him to never come to the mansion again, as vampires would kill him. She explains the war between Lycans and vampires and says that she is only helping him because she wants to know why he is so important to the Lycans. Meanwhile, Victor tells Craven that Celine has shown him many disturbing things and he needs to discuss them with her. But at the same time, he says that her memories are all jumbled up. Victor tells him to summon Marcus, but Craven tells him that Marcus is still hibernating, as Amelia will arrive tomorrow to awaken him, making Victor realize that he has been awakened a century earlier than his designated time. Later, Craven tells Erica that Celine has betrayed him, and he asks her to see him in his chambers, as he needs to tell her a few secrets. On the other hand, Celine takes Michael to an abandoned apartment building and tells him that the hallucinations he has been having are memories of the Lycan who bit him. He asks her why she hates the Lycans so much, and she tells him that one night she heard a commotion at her house and realized that the Lycans had butchered not only her parents and sister, but her 2 6-year-old nieces as well. Victor saved Celine and converted her so she could avenge her family, and ever since she has been hunting the Lycans. She tells him that she saw pictures of a woman at his apartment and asks about her. So Michael explains that he and his wife got into an accident where she died just before the ambulance arrived. She tells him to stay here while she goes to ask Victor for help, but he refuses, saying that he will come with her. However, she chains him, saying that he will turn into a wolf at full moon and kill humans to feed himself, so she can't allow him to roam around freely. Celine heads to the mansion, and Craven quickly stops her, telling her that she will follow his orders and tell Victor only what he allows her. But she just punches him in the face before leaving. She goes to Victor, who asks for proof that Lucian is alive, because he refuses to believe in coherent ideas. He scolds her for waking him up based on mere speculations, as the order of waking the elders hasn't been changed in the past 14 centuries. She begs him to let her bring proof, but Victor says that he will assign Craven to gather proof before telling her that she will not be shown an ounce of leniency, as the council will decide her fate tomorrow. Celine is locked inside a room and Craven tells her that he will try to convince the council to spare her life, but Celine is adamant and asks him if he cut the skin on Lucian's arm or if Lucian did that himself. Craven tells the guards not to open the door under any circumstances, as he doesn't want their future queen to run away with a Lycan, and Erica is disappointed to hear this. Craven goes to Khan and tells him that the plan has been changed, so now Soren's team will be picking up Amelia. The current Coven's leader Amelia reaches the station with various other vampires, but the Lycans ambush them and massacre all of them while Soren's team simply watches them die. Meanwhile, Erica turns off the fuse of the building before going to Celine and giving her a gun and car keys. When Celine questions why Erica is helping her, Erica says that she is helping herself, and Celine jumps out of the window before quickly escaping. A car full of armed Lycans watches her leave the mansion and follows her. Erica tells Craven that Celine has run away to meet Michael, and he orders to have Michael's head be brought to him. Victor, frustrated by the chaos, removes his blood pipes and stands up. On the other hand, Celine reaches Michael but soon realizes she is being followed and opens fire before telling Michael to jump down the window. Michael is scared, but having no other option, he jumps and is surprised to see that he landed on his feet. Celine fights with the Lycans while 2 Lycans disguised as police officers forcefully take Michael with them. Back in the mansion, Khan orders a death dealer to check why Amelia hasn't arrived yet, while Reyes uses a syringe to take a sample of Amelia's blood. On the way, Michael gets a nosebleed, and upon the sight of the full moon he shakes visibly before nearly changing into a wolf. So they quickly pull over and give him a shot that prevents the transformation. Elsewhere, Craven goes to Victor, but Victor says that he asked for Celine. So Craven explains that she has fled the mansion because she believes Lucian is alive. Suddenly, Celine shows up at the scene with an injured Singe, who after being tortured tells Victor that the Lycans have been looking for the direct descendant of Alexander Corvinus, whose entire town died from a plague, but only he survived because his body used the mutation to his advantage, and he became the first immortal. He had 3 children, and Victor says that everyone knows the story of Corvinus's children, as one was bitten by a bat, the other by a wolf, while the third one was left as a human. Victor says that Marcus is a direct descendant, but Singe explains that they needed the gene not tainted by werewolf or vampire blood. He explains that Michael is that descendant, and with his blood they can fuse the Lycan DNA with vampire DNA to form a hybrid that would be unstoppable. He says that they plan on injecting Lucian's blood into Michael, but Victor says that Lucian is dead and Singe corrects him that he isn't, which makes Craven run and quickly escape after getting a gun from Erica. Celine is about to shoot Singe, but he tells her that if Amelia's blood is added to Michael, then the hybrid will be complete. Suddenly, Khan is informed about the deaths of Amelia and her convoy and quickly comes to Victor to reveal that all council members have been assassinated and Amelia's blood was drained. Singe laughs, saying there is nothing they can do now, but Victor strikes Singe to death. Victor apologizes to Celine for doubting her and promises her forgiveness if she kills Michael. Meanwhile, Michael wakes up tied in a room while Lucian draws out some blood from Michael. Lucian tells him that because he is a Lycan, the vampires will kill him if they come across him, so he has no choice but to accept that he is now one of the Lycans. Michael tells Lucian that he has nothing to do with their war, but he looks at Lucian's necklace, which triggers a glimpse into Lucian's memories. He soon realizes that Lucian was in love with Victor's daughter Sonia, who was killed in front of him. And that's why he started the war. Lucian explains that Lycans were once slaves of the vampires, and Lucian was very loyal. He even fell in love with a vampire, but their union was forbidden, as Victor feared the blending of species so much that he killed his own daughter. Lucian explains that vampires have been killing Lycans for centuries now, but he is interrupted as Craven visits him. Lucian tells Craven that the council has been destroyed, and soon Craven will have enough power to sign a peace treaty with the Lycans. Craven says that Victor can't be defeated easily, but Lucian says that they have Michael for that. The vampires suddenly show up at the lair and the Lycans prepare for battle. Craven realizes there is no other way to leave and shoots Lucian with a silver nitrate bullet. Khan and Celine lead the death dealers, killing any Lycan that comes in their way, while Reyes finally reaches the lair carrying the bag with Amelia's blood and drops it in shock when he sees Lucian unconscious. He quickly notices the death dealers nearby and joins the battle by turning into his wolf form and dealing with a vampire using whips as a weapon. Celine senses Michael and departs from the group while Lucian gains consciousness and tries to get the bullet out of his body. Celine kills the two Lycans that come in her way and rushes to find Michael while Craven tries to escape the place without being seen by any of the death dealers. A Lycan corners Michael and Michael tries to escape, but Celine kills the Lycan. She frees Michael, telling him that Victor is on his way and he won't be satisfied until every Lycan is dead, but Michael says that they will kill Celine for helping him. Celine acknowledges that and Lucian watches as Michael and Celine get intimate. Meanwhile, Victor reaches the lair and is faced by a Lycan but kills him with his bare hands before stabbing him. Michael and Celine try to run away but come across Craven, who shoots Michael with silver nitrate bullets. Michael starts to tremble and Craven tries to drag Celine, but she refuses to go with him, saying she would love to see Victor kill Craven. However, Craven reveals that it was Victor who killed Celine's family and not the Lycans, as Victor every once in a while went and fed on human blood, defying his own rule of only feeding on cattle. Craven explains that he was the one who cleaned Victor's mess, and Victor wanted to drain Celine dry, but she reminded him of Sonia. He asked her to come with him, but Celine refuses, so he loads the gun to shoot her. However, Lucian arrives and stabs Craven in the leg, impaling him. Lucian quickly tells Celine to turn Michael into a vampire to save him, and she bites him, which turns him into a hybrid. Craven pulls out the knife and Lucian tells him that Craven might kill him, but what he wanted is now done. Craven shoots Lucian multiple times and Victor shows up to quickly pull Celine away and starts to choke Michael before throwing him out of the room. Celine looks at Victor with hate and tells him that she knows he killed her family, but he tells her that he has given her immortality in return. She then asks him why he burnt his own daughter, and Victor takes Sonia's necklace from Lucian's dead body before saying that he loved Sonia, but she was pregnant with Lucian's child, an abomination in the eyes of the two species, so he did what was necessary to protect his people. Michael transforms into a hybrid and emerges to confront Victor. He has the upper hand at first but is eventually overpowered as the death dealers open fire. Celine leaps in, cuts down the shooters and rushes to help, but Victor shoves her aside and begins to strangle Michael. Spotting Victor's sword, she beheads him before he can finish the kill. She drops the blade, sees the Lycans retreating and retrieves Sonia's necklace. Celine narrates that the effects of this night will endure. 2 vampire elders have fallen, one to the Lycans and one shockingly at a vampire's hand. Soon Marcus will take the throne and another wave of anger will rise as differences are set aside and treaties are forged against a common enemy, which is Celine and Michael. Meanwhile, Sinja's blood seeps into the chamber of the hibernating Marcus, triggering his awakening. Underworld evolution starts with us learning that Marcus was bitten by a bat and became the blood leader of the vampires, while his twin brother William was bitten by a wolf and became the first werewolf. In the year 1202 AD, an army of vampires led by vampire elders like Victor, Amelia, and Marcus arrives at a village of dead werewolves. Victor orders his forces to burn the bodies and search for William, but Marcus insists that William must not be harmed under any condition. As the bodies burn, the werewolves begin transforming, triggering a chaotic battle. And Victor orders Marcus to retreat to the woods as he can't risk losing him. Victor and Amelia capture William by throwing arrows attached to chains all around him. And Marcus screams, telling them to stop hurting his brother. However, they continue and William finally falls. Victor tells Marcus that he shouldn't have any sympathy for a beast and that Victor will decide William's fate. But Marcus openly states that there will be immense consequences if Victor kills either of the two brothers, asking Victor to place William in his custody. However, Victor says that if Marcus ever speaks of William, then Victor will have no choice but to kill him, and Marcus notices vampires aiming their arrows towards him. So he asks Victor for his verdict. Victor orders that William be forever imprisoned in a secret location, and only Victor is aware of it. In the present, as Celine and Michael escape, she thinks that her last hope is to awaken Marcus before Craven tries to kill him, as she is sure that he will try to attack Marcus while he is in hibernation. They eventually reach a vampire residence in the mountains, and Celine uses a passcode to enter before explaining that safe houses are linked to one main system from where they can tell which ones are in use, so they have to hurry. She quickly takes the weapons and tells Michael that she is going to the mansion alone to deal with Craven. Meanwhile, Craven orders his men to open Marcus's hibernation pod, and they quickly load their guns to shoot Marcus as soon as he comes out. But they find the pod empty because Marcus has already been awakened. He breaks the floor and flies up before quickly killing all the vampires near Craven. So Craven tries to shoot Marcus, who quickly pierces him and tells him that the blood memories of Singe have revealed Craven's treachery, and bites into his neck to suck his blood to find out his memories before killing him. Back at the safe house, Celine gives Michael a bag of blood and tells him to feed on it and replenish his energy, as he is an important asset who might have limitless power. She hands him a bag of blood before telling him that he is half vampire now, and if he doesn't anticipate his blood cravings, he will end up hunting humans. She warns him that human food can be lethal for him and apologizes for biting him, but he thanks her for saving his life. He tells her that he needs some time to process everything and asks her to make sure that she comes back safely. Elsewhere, an elder named Lorenz Maccaro sends in a team to investigate the aftermath of the battle in the Lycan's lair, and gets the news of new bullets with UV radiation, and the deaths of Amelia and Victor. They finally report that Marcus has burnt his coven, so Maccaro claims that the coven was never Marcus's. Maccaro remembers the necklace Lucian used to wear and checks Lucian's dead body, but the necklace is not there. So he next checks Victor and finds a metal disc hidden under his skin that matches a pendant originally worn by Sonia. Meanwhile, Marcus uses Craven's knowledge of computers and manages to find the active safe house, which has Celine and Michael. However, after Celine leaves, Michael also leaves the safe house and heads to a pub in the nearby town to order human food. Celine, who is still in the mountains, notices Marcus flying to the safe house and decides to head back. However, the food causes Michael to vomit, and the police officers in the pub quickly take out their guns after noticing a picture of Michael on the news stating him as a wanted criminal, while one rushes to his car to call for backup and alert the authorities about Michael's presence. Maccaro's men, who are spying on the police, quickly hear his name and send one of their men there. Michael tells the police to get away from him, but when they don't listen, he jumps on one of the officers to hurt him, but notices his fangs in the mirror, which causes him to get out of the pub and run. The backup arrives and follows him into the woods while Celine hears the gunshots and decides to follow the sound to protect Michael. They shoot Michael multiple times until Celine jumps in and defeats all the officers before feeding Michael her blood, so he doesn't die. Once Michael gets a bit better, Celine tells them they have to leave, but they are too late as Marcus finds them. He tells her that Craven and Victor both deserve to die, but believes that Celine is hiding something and is about to bite her when Michael opens fire on Marcus. Celine tells him to run and they hijack a truck on the road, but Marcus flies after them. Marcus gets into a fight with Michael in the back of the truck and he tries to steal Sonia's necklace, but Celine shoots him till he drops the necklace. Marcus goes to attack Celine, which causes the truck to hit the nearby mountain. But Celine eventually presses him between the mountain and the truck, which damages his wings, giving them enough time to escape. Michael gets in the front seat and asks if Marcus is a hybrid, which Celine confirms. Michael then asked why he wanted the necklace, and Celine is unsure, but she tells him that they have a bigger problem, as the sun is rising. It starts to burn Celine's hands, and Michael quickly takes charge of the steering wheel, driving them up a mountain into a warehouse where he quickly covers the car with a black cloth. He then throws black paint over the windows and takes Celine inside a container before going to find a first aid kit, but by that time Celine has already healed herself and the two get intimate. Meanwhile, Marcus hides himself from the sun using his bat wings. Early in the morning, police officers search the area and find the safe house, but Maccaro's men show up in helicopters and they deal with the officers, clearing the area of any proof of supernatural creatures before bombing the place. Celine wakes up to find Michael trying to repair a car in the warehouse, and she wonders why Marcus was after the necklace. Celine recalls that she saw it as a child but does not know its significance or remember where she saw it. Maccaro's men report that the supplies were stolen, and a fight occurred just before dawn, so Maccaro tells them to stay in the area as he is sure Celine will reappear at night. On the other hand, Celine takes Michael to vampire historian Andreas Tanis, who was exiled after Victor believed he was spreading malicious lies. She takes him to the area where she exiled him, but finds a new gate there and hands Michael a loaded gun before getting out. She breaks the lock and enters the gate, but falls into Tanis's trap, who locks her in before a werewolf attacks Michael. Michael turns into his hybrid form and fights the werewolf while Celine deals with 2 werewolves underground. Michael jumps inside and Celine eventually finds her way to Tanis, who tries to shoot at Celine but misses. Suddenly, Michael jumps on Tanis and he agrees to talk to Celine. Celine realizes that Tanis was doing business with Lucian by selling him bullets with UV radiation, and in return Lucian was providing him with luxuries and werewolf guards. Celine tells him that she killed Victor, and Tanis realizes that Celine has found the truth. So she takes a few weapons that can be used against the vampires and asks him to tell her why Victor exiled him. When Tanis refuses, Celine threatens him, and Michael hands him Sonia's necklace, asking him why Marcus was after it. Tanis finally tells her that Victor was not the first vampire, as he was one of the famous warlords, and Marcus is the first vampire. When Victor was on his deathbed, Marcus offered immortality, asking Victor to help him win a battle against Marcus's twin brother William, who had created an army of barbaric werewolves incapable of turning into their human form. Due to William's destructiveness, his barbaric nature was a threat to all kinds, so Victor's army eventually turned immortal and hunted them down. Victor did not kill the brothers because he was led to believe that doing so would result in the immediate extinction of all vampires and werewolves, so he imprisoned William. Celine's father was the architect who built William's prison, and the pendant is the key, so when Lucian escaped with the key, Victor killed Celine's family because they knew the prison's location. And currently Celine is the only person aware of the prison's location. Victor realized that Celine was too young to know the location, but Marcus is after her as he can decode the memory from her blood. Michael questions why Marcus is looking for William after such a long time, and Tanis refers Celine to Maccaro for further help. However, once they leave, Marcus enters and forces Tanis to reveal that one key was with Sonia, but the other was concealed beneath Victor's flesh. Marcus then drinks Tanis's blood to learn Celine's location before killing Tanis. Meanwhile, Celine reaches the area where she is allowed inside after she shows the necklace to the guard. Upon meeting with Maccaro, Celine recognizes his ring and realizes that he is Alexander Corvinus. He explains that he hadn't expected his sons to create such a mess, as he is tired of keeping the war secret from humans, but refuses to help her kill his sons. He tells Celine that she is a death dealer, so she is no different than Marcus and even less noble than William, as William can't control his treachery. Celine blames him for letting his sons turn many people into monsters, but Marcus shows up and gets into a fight with Michael. He impales Michael, stealing Sonia's pendant, and Celine opens fire at him, but Marcus pins her to the wall and drinks her blood. She manages to reach a gun and shoot him in the face repeatedly until he is forced to get away. She then removes the object that is stabbing Michael and drops her blood on his wounded areas to help him recover, but she weeps when he doesn't wake up. On the other side, Marcus reaches Maccaro and shames him for letting his son suffer in darkness for so long, but Maccaro says that Marcus can't control William. However, Marcus believes that they have a strong bond and that soon there will be a new race of hybrids that will worship him. Marcus impales Maccaro, saying that he is nothing special, before fatally stabbing Maccaro and stealing the second portion of the key from him. Marcus leaves when he hears a helicopter landing, and Maccaro tells his right-hand man to bring Celine to him. Later, he tells Celine that she is the only hope left and cuts his wrist, telling Celine to drink his blood so she can have enough power to defeat Marcus. Once she is done, he tells her to leave with Michael's dead body and the surviving men on a helicopter and blows up his ship, ending it all. Elsewhere, Marcus finds the location of the prison and inserts the key to find a casket containing William. While Celine is taken to the prison by Maccaro's team, she gets flashbacks of being in this area before in her childhood and tells the team to take the helicopter to the opening near the river, but it is submerged, so they jump into the river. They find the opening and rush inside, but it's too late as Marcus has already freed William. William quickly growls while Marcus tries to calm him down, telling him that he will never harm his own brother. Celine takes the key from the casket, but they hear William's growls and quickly open fire at him. However, Marcus stops Celine and the two get into a fight. She shoots at him multiple times, but her gun runs out of ammunition, so she uses the key to lower the gate, trapping Marcus on the other side. Meanwhile, Michael is presumed dead and carried aboard the helicopter, but now wakes up. Celine joins the team in hunting down William, but they say that they only have bullets with UV radiation, which won't harm William. However, Celine is sure they will at least slow him down. During their conversation, William appears and kills the last two people of Maccaro's team, so Celine takes two guns and shoots him with both until he has no option but to retreat. She throws two bombs at him, but he quickly jumps to another side and the rubble from the blast almost falls on Celine. She hides and finds a machine gun, but she notices the people on Maccaro's team turning into werewolves as it is the full moon. She remembers how the early werewolves couldn't turn into human form and opens fire on them, but they outnumber her. Michael jumps into her rescue, and they defeat the newly turned werewolves. Celine is shocked to see him alive, but before she can say anything, William attacks them, so Celine opens fire at him. On the other side, Marcus finds a small opening under the gate because a rock stopped the complete closing and opens the gate to free himself. He notices the men from the helicopter shooting at William and pulls it down using the rope that Michael used to jump into the building, making it crash. Michael fights with William while Celine deals with Marcus and manages to push Marcus into the spinning wings of the helicopter, causing his hand to get cut. Marcus hears William's roars and finds that Michael has killed him by ripping his head off. Marcus, in anger, stabs Celine, saying that Victor should have killed her with the rest of her family, but Celine breaks his bat wing and kills him by pushing him into the rotor blades of the helicopter. The sun starts coming out, but this time it doesn't affect her, and she realizes that Alexander Corvinus's blood granted her hybrid abilities, including being immune to the effects of sunlight. She then narrates that chaos is inevitable, but now she can look into the light with a newfound hope. Underworld Endless War Part 3 opens up a few years after Underworld Evolution, where Celine seeks help from Michael Corvin, who has powers of both Lycans and vampires, and returns to Paris for the last Lycan brother. However, the world has changed, and now humans are hunting the supernatural beings that coexist with them. Later, she receives a picture from a hidden camera in Crandall's room and sends it to Michael before telling him to be careful. However, Crandall picks up Michael's scent and quickly transforms into his wolf form. Just as Michael enters the motel, the women inside open fire at him, trapping him against a wall, but Michael manages to overpower them and get into a fight with Crandall. Michael pushes Crandall out of the window and Celine jumps onto him, shooting him repeatedly till he changes back to his human form. Crandall laughs and tells her that the humans are hunting vampires now, so Celine will be joining them in hell soon. But Celine remains unfazed and shoots him dead. Later, Celine thinks that Crandall is right, as the vampires are now the hunted and war will never end. Underworld Awakening begins with humanity's discovery and desire to wipe out the Lycans and the vampires, with snippets from news broadcasts and video footage revealing humans hunting down and brutally killing anyone infected with vampire or Lycan blood. During one such raid, Celine ambushes a squad and takes them out with explosives. She then runs up to the roof and resolves to leave the human world for good with Michael. She jumps off the roof and takes out the armed men pursuing her one by one, until she reaches the port where Michael is waiting for her. However, humans lie in wait near the docks and they shoot Michael with a silver grenade, sending him into the water. So Celine jumps in to save him, but the squad fires bullets and drops an explosive into the water that takes out both Celine and Michael. Sometime later, Celine is woken up, frozen in a cryogenic chamber by visions of someone's escape from the compound where she is being held. She shatters the ice and frees herself, as Dr. Jacob Lane, the head of the facility, is informed of Subject 2's disappearance and Celine's breakout. He orders them to knock her out with sleeping gas, but she manages to escape through the air vents into a control room where she grabs a worker and interrogates him about Michael. While she is at it, another worker attacks her with a knife, whom she kills before running outside. In the corridor, she passes through a dozen guards in an instant, putting them all down, and then continuing her rampage on the way. She eventually finds a window at the end of the corridor and shoots it to escape, but a doctor arrives with more guards to subdue her. However, he is ordered by Dr. Jacob to let her go so that they can use her to find Subject 2. Thus, she jumps off the window onto a passing truck and looks back at the building, which has the name Antigen carved on it. On the way, the Antigen truck driver notices Celine hanging off the back of his vehicle, so he hits the brakes, making her fall forward in front of the truck. He then comes out and proceeds to shoot her in the head, but is confused as she latches onto him, and sucks blood from his neck to heal her wound before leaving. Moments later, she breaks into a store and grabs an overcoat, but then notices that it is a gun shop with weapons and even teeth props. Subsequently, she vaults over the fence to enter the docks where she was supposed to meet Michael. A patrolling police officer warns her for trespassing and reveals that it has been closed since the cleansing of the non-humans 12 years ago. But before the officer can question her, she slips away unnoticed. On the way, Celine sees visions of a massacred body in a police car, but at the same time she sees police cars pass by, so she follows them. Elsewhere, a detective and an officer investigate the dead body, with the officer named Kolb suggesting that a Lycan must have done it, but the senior detective Sebastian rejects the idea for lack of evidence. At that moment, Sebastian is called and told about a subject's escape from the Antigen facility, and as he is talking, he looks up and sees Celine watching from an overhead bridge, but she hides quickly and goes undetected. However, a man in the crowd at the crime scene where the detective is investigating the shredded body takes the cue and looks up where the detective was looking, and he notices Celine jumping down from the bridge. Moments later, Sebastian visits the Antigen facility to investigate the escape. However, Dr. Jacob claims that a subject attempted to flee but was put down. On his way out, Officer Kolb shows Sebastian a picture of Celine jumping off the Antigen building, which he received through fax. Elsewhere, the doctor who had let Celine go arrives at his apartment without knowing that he is closely followed in by her, who breaks in and interrogates him about Subject 2. He tells her that she and Subject 2 are somehow related, and she can see through its eyes, but that he does not have further information. She then throws him down through the window to his death and jumps down as she sees a vision of Subject 2 entering a small hatch. Celine quickly follows the passing police cars and is led to an underground tunnel where the man from the crime scene named David follows her. He sees a few Lycans underground and hides, but is confronted by Celine, to whom he pledges allegiance as they are both vampires. They are led to Subject 2 by the Lycans, one of whom she kills while the rest run away. Subject 2 turns out to be a teenage girl named Eve, with whom they quickly escape in a van but are closely followed by 3 Lycans who eventually latch onto the vehicle and attack them. David kills one of them with his blade and Celine shoots another, while Eve is initially overpowered by a Lycan. However, her fear transforms her and makes her rip the Lycan in half. Later, the trio of David, Celine, and Eve leave the city in the van, and inside, Celine questions the girl only to discover that Eve is her daughter who was born and raised in the lab, and it was she who freed Celine from her chamber. Celine also notices that Eve's injuries are not healing, but David assures her that there is a doctor in his coven. Meanwhile, at Antigen, a doctor named Lita approaches Dr. Jacob, confessing her worries about Eve's survival and the research she was a part of, but the doctor dismisses her worries. On the other hand, David leads Celine and Eve into his coven, which is hidden near a dam. Inside, David calls for a doctor, but his father, Thomas, who leads the coven, is suspicious of Celine. However, David convinces him to help Eve, who upon being fed with blood starts to heal. Thomas questions Celine about Eve's origin, but she dismisses him and vows to leave when Eve regains her strength. Celine retreats from the hall to be alone, and she notices a death dealer's overcoat on display, so David approaches her and asks her to train them like death dealers to make the coven strong again, but she refuses, telling him that Thomas would not allow that. Meanwhile, Eve recovers her strength and is exploring the coven when Thomas approaches her and claims to know her hybrid identity. Simultaneously, David tells Celine that he believes in resistance against the humans, but Thomas arrives and warns them that the Lycans were almost wiped out when they tried to resist. He also tells Celine to leave with Eve as he fears that humans would follow her to their coven, but David protests against this. Later, Celine visits Eve, who is busy seeing how her wounds heal, and she complains about her mother's coldness, which Celine attributes to the loss of Michael rather than a lack of love. At that moment, the ground shakes violently due to an enemy attack, creating chaos in the coven, so Thomas orders everyone to retreat further underground. However, Celine and David rally the young to fight against the humans. Thomas vehemently protests against it and claims that they would be easily outnumbered and blames Celine for the attack. But David and Celine are not to be persuaded, and they prepare themselves for a fight. Consequently, the vampires brace for a human invasion, but are taken by surprise when Lycans pour into the coven. The Lycans start to massacre the vampires, while Celine efficiently takes out any Lycan in her path and reaches Eve's room, where she tells her to come with her, but Celine is thrown away by a Lycan. This enrages Eve and makes her turn into her hybrid form to attack the Lycan, while David takes on the Lycans with his metal whip, cutting down many of them to shreds. But one grabs onto him and takes him down. Celine, on the other hand, runs out of bullets, so she grabs an axe to kill the Lycan, which Eve is hanging onto. She tells Eve that it is time to leave, and on their way they see a Lycan pin David to the ground and bite into his neck, but Celine headshots the Lycan and saves him. However, they hear the howl of a very powerful Lycan. Thus, Celine asks David to take Eve with him while she goes up to the hall to deal with the Lycan. She can hear it from behind the curtains, and it appears to be a monstrously large one from its noise and shadow. Celine takes aim and fires through the curtains, but the Lycan is unfazed and charges at her, so she runs to grab a sword but is slapped into a column. However, she manages to retrieve the sword and defend herself against his strikes. When he charges at her again, she backflips on the wall and breaks the silver sword in his back, only to see him heal rapidly and knock her out. When Celine regains consciousness, she sees the vampires recovering from their defeat as David lies bleeding out near Thomas. She inquires about her daughter and is told by David that Thomas handed her away to the Lycans to appease them. David dies, and an angry Celine berates Thomas for handing the last direct descendant of Alexander Corvinus to the Lycans, who are more powerful than ever contrary to Thomas's knowledge, who considered them nearly extinct. She then cuts into David's abdomen and shoves her bleeding hand inside to reach for his heart and squeezes it to return him to life before leaving. Sometime later, Celine takes Sebastian at gunpoint in a parking lot and questions him about how he knew that Lycans were not extinct. He takes her to his office and shows her documents revealing conspiracies to fake the extinction of Lycans, and attributes them to higher authorities which might be infiltrated by the Lycans. However, Celine thinks the infiltration is at the lower level. Meanwhile, at Antigen, Dr. Jacob tells his sponsors and staff that the vaccine would soon be ready and would grant the subjects immunity to silver, self-healing, and strength. When Lita enters and confronts him for wanting to dissect Eve, whom she raised herself, the doctor thanks Lita for her services and gets one of his associates to choke her to death, thereby revealing their Lycan identity. Later, in a lab, Dr. Jacob injects Lita's killer with the vaccine, revealing him to be his son Quint Lane, the same big Lycan who attacked the Coven. Dr. Jacob assures Quint that soon they will clone Eve and use the hybrid genetic material to produce as much vaccine as necessary to grant Lycans immunity against silver and give them absolute power. Meanwhile, Celine and Sebastian join forces and prepare to attack Antigen, while Eve wakes up to sleeping gas being filled in her room, which she resists by trying to break out of the room but is unable to and falls unconscious. On their way to Antigen, Celine reveals that she can tolerate sunlight, an ability she got from Alexander Corvinus, prompting Sebastian to confess his late wife's vampire identity, who burned herself in the sun when the humans raided their house during the purge. Shortly after, they arrive at Antigen and Celine rushes through the courtyard to the door while being shot at from behind. She gets into the elevator and the guards surround the elevator exits on every floor, so Celine plants bombs on every level, detonating them when the elevators open, releasing silver nitrate gas, which burns the guards. Quint informs Dr. Jacob about the attack when he is about to operate on Eve, so they decide to move the operation elsewhere. Meanwhile, Celine rampages through the corridors while Sebastian observes the camera from the control panel and guides her path. Moments later, Celine sees Dr. Jacob and his staff transporting Eve on a wheeled stretcher, but Quint and his men attack her, and she is forced to jump into an air vent where she is followed by the Lycans, whom she barely manages to kill. On the other hand, Sebastian tries to contact Celine to tell her that Eve is being transported in a van but fails. Simultaneously, Celine jumps through the vent into a room and finds Michael in a cryogenic chamber, but then she is ambushed by a few guards whom she shoots dead. She then shoots a bullet into the chamber and leaves to catch up with the van transporting Eve, while Sebastian also leaves his post to pursue the van. On her way, Celine is ambushed by a Lycan who makes them both fall through the elevator shaft, where Celine recovers from the fall and finishes off the Lycan before emptying her guns into the free-falling elevator floor, which is set in motion by Quint from above. She then braces underneath it as it crashes upon her, but she survives. In the parking lot, Sebastian blocks the van's way with his car and headshots the driver. However, Dr. Jacob Lane drives through the car and upwards towards the exit. Elsewhere, Quint transforms into his gigantic Lycan form, while in the parking lot the van is turned over by Celine, who also shoots dead the two Lycan nurses who attack her. However, before she can save Eve, Quint arrives and throws a car at her, which narrowly misses her, and then chases her through the parking lot, flipping cars that come in his way. Sebastian arrives and takes the opportunity to shoot Dr. Jacob, but he remains unfazed and sends him flying with a throw. He is about to finish Sebastian, but Eve attacks the doctor, who overpowers her. However, David arrives in the nick of time to save her as he distracts the doctor and then holds back the guards that arrive at the spot. Meanwhile, Celine is badly beaten by Quint and hides in a security room where he cannot get to her. He eventually turns human to enter the narrow passageway and catch Celine, but she plants a grenade inside his abdomen, and he heals rapidly, trapping the grenade before it explodes inside him, blowing him to pieces.
I heal instantly.
Eve also rips the neck of Dr. Jacob, thereby ending his resistance. Later, Celine and Eve embrace each other, while Sebastian tells them to run as he distracts the cops, and David volunteers to take them to a nearby safe house. However, they get back to Michael's room before leaving and find his chamber empty. Eve's visions lead them to the roof, but he is not found there. Thus, Celine accepts the challenge to save Michael from the Lycans as she saved her daughter and resolves to return her coven to its former glory. Underworld Blood Wars begins with Celine being chased by Lycans on her motorbike, and she thinks she has become an outcast targeted by both vampires and Lycans.
Gone. Now
She reveals that she separated from her husband and daughter and now has no idea where they are. She is eventually cornered by the Lycans in a blocked underground tunnel, where they surround and beat her up with the intent of taking her alive, but she fights back and kills many of them, while the final one is run over by David arriving in his car. Celine tells David to leave her alone, but he informs her that the Lycans are making a move under their new leader named Marius, who aims to find Eve and use her blood to dominate the vampires, so she must help him find Eve before the Lycans do. However, Celine is against this idea. Just then, an injured Lycan shoots David in the stomach, before being subdued by Celine, who lets him go, so that he can take the message of her not knowing Eve's location to Marius before escaping with an injured David. Elsewhere, Thomas is welcomed at a mansion by a vampire named Varga, who takes him to Vampire Elder Samira's chamber, where she shares her fear that Lycans might dominate and murder vampires under the rule of Marius. Meanwhile, David guides Celine to a safe house. While back at the mansion, Samira asks Thomas to convince the council members of the Eastern Coven to show leniency to Celine, so that she can be used to train death dealers to fight the Lycans. Meanwhile, at the Lycan base, Marius arrives and is guided by a Lycan to the War Council where the pack leaders are waiting for him. Marius finds them quarreling among themselves, so he urges them to maintain unity if they want to capture Eve and then wipe out the vampires with the newfound power. He then checks on Gregor, the survivor of the pack that was destroyed by Celine, and is informed of Celine's message of her own ignorance of Eve's whereabouts. However, Marius is unconvinced and threatens Gregor, who tells him of having shot David with a tracker bullet, which appeases Marius. At the other end, in the safe house, Celine extracts the self-propelled bullet from David's abdomen, unaware of the tracker inside it. Later, Thomas asks the council to grant clemency to Celine and invite her back into the coven to train the recruits, but Cassius claims to be unable to forgive her for killing Victor, while Samira pretends to have the same opinion. However, Thomas convinces Cassius that Selene can prove to be a turning point in the war against Lycans, and Samira indirectly supports his claims, making Cassius agree to the idea, but with Samira being responsible for Selene's actions. Back at the safe house, Selene and David are alerted by alarms about intruders in the safe house, whom they rush and easily deal with, but they reveal themselves to be vampires from the Eastern Coven, sent there to bring in Selene to train the new death dealers. Selene does not trust them, and David tries to convince her, but suddenly the alarms ring again, alerting them of a Lycan raid, so Selene reluctantly agrees, and they all escape before the Lycans arrive. Moments later, Selene and David are greeted at the Eastern Coven by Varga and Samira, who inform Selene of her job of training the young vampires, and take them to a welcome event. At the party, Samira takes an unusual interest in David and inquires if he really was revived by Selene's blood, a fact which he confirms but then leaves to talk to his father. Thomas asks him to return Samira's affections as she is granting them sanctuary, but David is uninterested. Later in her room, Samira worries about dealing with Marius, for which Varga vows to step up. However, Samira tells him that he is not enough and they get intimate as she plots a plan to gain power. Elsewhere, Marius injects himself with a blood vial and feels himself get stronger because of it. While at the Coven, Selene trains the vampires by making them aim at Lycan holograms, and Varga silently observes this. Later at the Lycan base, the leaders analyze the Eastern Coven's defenses and conclude that it is extremely strong, but Marius thinks it is possible as long as they acquire Eve's hybrid blood. Meanwhile, at the Coven training facility, Varga offers to spar with Selene for the students to observe and learn from, to which she reluctantly agrees, and they go back and forth in a cage fight, with Selene eventually dominating Varga. However, Varga cunningly cuts her palm with a poisoned blade, paralyzing Selene and gaining the upper hand. Just then, Samira enters and reveals that Selene was lured in by her for her special blood. Varga then kills all the students with Selene's guns to make her look like a traitor, and alarms are then sounded in the Coven. David and Thomas try to investigate, but they are stopped by the guards, so they use a secret passage to get to Samira's room, where they find Selene being drained of blood. Back at the training facility, the vampire elders and Cassius are furious at the massacre, and he orders Selene to be captured alive. On the other hand, Thomas advises David to take Selene to Var Dor, when suddenly Varga and Samira arrive, who are taken on by Thomas and held off for David to escape, but they subdue and kill him when he gets distracted. Samira then tells David to surrender as there is no escape with the sunrise near. However, he jumps through the window anyway and runs in the sunlight, but to everyone's surprise remains unaffected by it. Samira is shocked by this, but then realizes that it is due to Selene's blood and becomes joyous at having acquired a lot of it. David then crashes through the mansion's gate in his car, and later he feeds Selene his blood to replenish her strength. Selene regains consciousness and offers David her condolences for Thomas's death before revealing that Eve made her promise to never search for her. David tells her to rest for now as they leave in the car, whereas the vampire elders prepare a squad led by the vampire named Alexia to capture Selene, and they interpret her ability to tolerate the sun as a conspiracy made along with the Lycans. Later, Samira is annoyed at the high concentration of poison in Selene's blood, which Varga claims would take some time to clear up. Meanwhile, the squad tracks down David's car to a train station, the videotape of which is examined by Alexia, to determine that Selene and David are traveling north. At the mansion, Samira fantasizes about the power she would gain from Selene's blood, but Alexia arrives, informing her of Selene and David's journey. Samira thus tasks Alexia to travel to the Northern Coven, Var Dor, to confirm Selene's presence there, before she risks sending a full squad after her. While the train heads towards the north, Alexia sneaks into the Lycan base and is caught by Marius, who drags her aside and gets intimate with her, revealing their secret affair. Alexia informs him of Selene's journey to Var Dor, making it a target for Marius, who needs Eve's blood before he can attack the Eastern Coven. When the train reaches the north, Selene and David arrive at a cliff with Castle Var Dor on top of it, and they enter the castle, where a white-haired vampire, Lena, welcomes them before taking them to their leader, named Vidar. He asks about the purpose of their visit, and tells David that the coven is credited to his mother, a grand vampire elder, Amelia. He claims that his parents hid his lineage so they could protect him, and then Vidar gives him Thomas's legendary silver sword, which effectively makes him the rightful leader of the Eastern Coven. However, David rejects all of this as an excuse made by his parents to abandon him and leaves to get some fresh air outside. Vidar then tells Selene to give David a ball-shaped relic which was left for him by his mother. Outside, Selene explains to David that parents often have to make unpleasant decisions to protect their children in the vampire world, just like she had to in the case of Eve, and then she gives him the relic that has a ring containing a vial of Amelia's blood, offering a glance into her memories. Moments later, Selene finds a strange chamber full of baths and mummies while exploring the coven and sees Lena busy with mummification. Selene inquires about it and is told that those mummies are vampires who take poison to enter purgatory and witness the sacred world for enlightenment. Lena claims to have acquired it, through which only by looking at Celine she can tell that she has loved a Lycan, killed a vampire elder, and has a hybrid daughter, for whose safety she would need to push beyond her limits. Meanwhile, David imbibes the drop of Amelia's blood, which takes him through her memories of David's birth, making him shed a tear for his late mother before he is surprised by a Lycan whom he shoots with a throwing knife, and then runs inside to alert the others of a Lycan ambush. Inside the coven, Celine searches for David, intending to run away with him. However, he rejects the idea and decides to protect the coven from the attack. He picks up his father's sword and leads the attack against the Lycans in the castle courtyard. In the battle, the Lycans with their machine guns and crossbows dominate the vampires, who fight with sword and shield. Celine leads the attack and uses her throwing stars and knives to take down Lycans. However, Lycans overwhelm the vampires and get inside the castle, with a few of them chasing Lena around the castle. She takes down 2 of them using her ability to teleport, but the third transforms and pins her to the ground. Just then, David attacks a party of Lycans inside the castle and cuts them down to come to Lena's aid. They then team up to take on the enemy, with Lena cutting down many Lycans, and David taking one down into the pool, and then jumping out to slice up another. Just then, in the courtyard, Marius arrives and faces off with Celine, who punches him, but he shrugs it off and returns the blow, sending her flying against the wall. She then jumps up and retreats into the castle and picks up a sword to fight him. However, he smashes her through the castle wall, sending her out on the cliff and throws the sword down the cliff. He then tries to negotiate the information about Eve's location while ensuring her safety, but she pulls him down the cliff, landing smoothly herself while he crashes down on the frozen lake. He then transforms into a humanoid Lycan form, unlike the other Lycans, and they engage in a fierce battle until he grabs a hold of her and shatters the frozen layer of the lake with her body. She is then stabbed in the back by Alexia, who licks the blood off the blade, and confirms that Celine really does not know Eve's location. An angry Marius then shoots Celine and roars out to the Lycans to retreat as Celine slips beneath the ice layer of the lake. He then tells Alexia that he is going to attack the Eastern Coven, thus it is time for her to play her part in it. Later, Lena starts to mummify Celine to heal her through the power of water, while in the Eastern Coven, Samira sips Celine's blood from a goblet and feels power coursing through her veins. Back at the castle, David sets off for the Eastern Coven despite Vidar's advice for him to stay. Meanwhile, Alexia returns to the coven and kills the guard in the surveillance room to shut down all the cameras. She then goes to Samira and informs her about the Lycan attack on the coven and the death of Celine. After which, Samira cuts her neck, revealing that she knew about her affair with Marius and used it to her advantage. After that, Samira brings the proposition of attacking the Lycans, which the council members refuse, but she stages a coup and puts them at gunpoint. However, just then, David arrives and lays claim to the throne of the coven, which is affirmed by the elders when they taste the blood in Amelia's relic. Varga and the guards turn against Samira and decide to lock her up when the alarms ring, alerting them of a Lycan attack. Moments later, the Lycans park their trucks in the courtyard, and armed with shields they break into the coven by blowing off the main door. Both sides exchange fire, however. The Lycans bring heavy machine guns that blow holes into the windows, letting in sunlight and burning many vampires to a crisp. Having no other option, the vampires retreat while David stands his ground unaffected by the sunlight and exchanges fire with Marius, with both parties strongly withholding their ground. Right then, Celine arrives and cuts across the Lycans with super speed, while the armor-covered vampires from the Northern Coven follow her lead. They are led by Lena, who starts cutting down Lycans, while Celine gets Marius to pursue him into the corridors. Meanwhile, Samira is freed after killing her detainers and attacks David in the corridors. However, their battle spills into a room where they injure each other, with Samira finally coming on top. But David stabs her through her head just when she is enjoying her new tolerance to the sunlight after the window is opened by David. In the basement, Celine fights Marius, and a drop of his blood spills on her lips, making her see Michael in his memories. She then cuts him with a knife and locks herself in the cage of the training facility, as she licks the knife to discover that Marius found and killed Michael for his blood. He shows her Michael's last blood vial, and then bends the bars of the cage in his Lycan form and starts smashing Celine. However, in her rage, she rips his spine out of his body, instantly killing him and ending the war. Moments later, David takes Marius's decapitated head outside to announce an end to the war. After some time, Celine feeds all the vampires with her blood to give them strength for the future, making them immune to sunlight, while she becomes one of the 3 highest elders along with David and Lena. She then contemplates her long but unpredictable life on the frozen lake outside Vardor, where Eve finally returns to see her. Thanks for watching until the very end. I've gone over a lot of previous comments on requested recaps, and the majority of them are in the works, so make sure notifications are on, and as always, stay awesome and take care.